So, welcome, Soren.
Thank you.
You're from Wai-ora Landscape.
Yes, I am.
And today we're going to talk about aquatic plants. So, how did you get involved in this field?
Right. Well, Wai-ora Forest Landscapes, who I work for, have won a contract with Pegasus Town, new Pegasus Town development out north of Christchurch. We specialise in conservation and revegetation work, amongst other things, and we have a nursery out there that we grow plants specifically for that reason, eco-sourced plants.
Okay.
And so we won this contract with Pegasus Town to establish a large conservation area out there.
Right.
And it involved the usual, dunes and drylands and things, areas. But there was also some very large lake areas that they required some aquatic plants for. And we had never had much to do with those, and nobody else had either.
Yeah.
When I started doing some research, I discovered. So I set out to find out how on earth we went about finding and sourcing and growing aquatic plants, and that's how all this turned
and
out.
These are native aquatic plants?
These are native, and one of them is endemic.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, yeah.
So, specifically, what kind of aquatic plants? They're
Right,
native,
yeah. There was 5 in particular, and there are some more, but these particular 5, 3 of them are macrophytes, a pondweed really, and the other 2 are charophytes, which is a fancy name for an algae, really.
Okay.
And they grow differently. The macrophytes have a rootlet and sit in the mud and grow almost like a terrestrial plant would.
Okay.
But the charophytes, the algae, have more of a hold fast, and they're much more fragile and grow in slightly different ways, as I found out.
All right. And we've got some examples.
We have,
plants
yes.
Here.
And what I've got are the macrophytes, because the charophytes at this time of year are just not readily available and too hard to because they're algae, to set out on a piece of paper like this. This one here with the large leaf, I must say too that this one and this one here are both going into their winter phases and are starting to deteriorate in the water, and they regrow in the spring. So they don't look quite how they would in the spring. But this is Propagation cheesemanii. It's a pondweed. Sits in the mud, and these large leaves float on top of the water, so it's easily identifiable. Has narrow leaves. Yeah, it is. This is Propagation ocreatus. Similar. Grows in a similar way to this, has a much thinner leaf, and these flower heads, which were flower heads, sit above the water, and it's quite easily identifiable for that reason too. Once it's in flower, you can see it really easily.
What colour are the flowers?
Well, the flowers are pink actually. They're sort of a dark pink, And there's another weed which I've got here called Propagation crispus, which is one of the nasty ones that invades ponds.
Right.
And as you can see, it looks in the spring, these two would look the same colour. And these leaves are similar, but the way to tell crispus is this wavy edge on the leaf.
I see.
And this is what happens to this plant and this plant, the Propagations. In the winter, they start to break down like this, but they form these little rootlets, and in the summer they're rhizomatous, so they take off again in the spring.
Regenerate.
Yeah, they regenerate. This one is Myriophyllum propinquum. Terrible names. And I found this one is semi-terrestrial, so it will grow on the ground at round pond edges mostly.
Right.
I found this in the water, and you can see it's got much longer stem and rootlets developing already. Whereas this I found actually on the edge of the water, buried deep in the mud, and all the roots are attached. So, but of course you get other plants with it as well.
And do these long stems grow out across the
Yes,
pond?
they do, although this one tends to more hang about the edges of the pond itself, or the lake, or wherever you're happening to harvest them from. Yeah.
So why would people want to
find
these
them,
plants, find them and harvest them?
Well, really for the same reasons that we're trying to, replant natives everywhere else. Our urban and land use and our urbanisation has really destroyed lots of stream life, and a lot of the natives have been taken over by exotic plants, as you know, as has happened everywhere else. And that's created very bare sort of, you know, streams and lakes and rivers. And means it's just a better diversity, and it encourages the biological life to come back into streams, and then we end up with better health, better water quality, all the same reasons that, you know, but because streams and, you know, there's been a big focus on terrestrial plants and plants on the ground,
there has.
and people have kind of forgotten a bit about aquatics. And
it's not something that springs to
no,
mind
and we hadn't done a lot with it either. It wasn't until we started getting some requests for some that I did this investigation and thought, and then now I'm keen as mustard. I want everybody to have a go, because I think it's not that difficult to do, really.
So if people or groups are keen to revegetate their waterways,
right?
How do they
go about it?
Plants and go about it?
Right. Well, that's possibly one of the most difficult things, finding them. This Propagation cheesemanii, this one with the big leaf, you'll see in lots of places. People probably just haven't noticed it much. I even found it in a water race on the side of a road. So looking for them, that's the most difficult thing. And what I'd suggest is they go to their local creek or stream and see what they can find. Identifying them is you can get, if you go on the internet, you can, and onto the NIWA site actually, they have some really good photos and some really good descriptions of what to look for. They were very helpful.
And they could always bring them in to someone like you, I suppose.
Absolutely,
to
they can bring them in to us to identify them, or we can tell them, if they want to ring us, where we got them from and where we've been getting them from. You also have to be really careful not to destroy the original, you know, where you're getting them from.
You don't want to take everything out.
No, because then you're destroying another little place where they were growing, so you don't want to do that. So you have to be very careful with sourcing them and harvesting them, and just take enough material for what you need. Clearly, with something like this, you could break that up into several pieces. You know, I mean, all those little rootlets will grow, and you just have to stuff them into some mud, or put them into these peat pots that I've got here too. There's 2 or 3 different ways of doing them. With plants like this, you could also possibly do that, because clearly that's got several places where you could pull pieces off and
you just pop them into
pop them in, and they will possibly, you know, quite likely take off.
And I guess when you are collecting the plants, you need to be really careful to get the right ones.
That's right.
Because you don't want to be spreading
That's
nasties.
right. There can be some nasty things in some of those streams, and this is one that I was talking about before. Propagation crispus, it's an exotic, and you'll find it everywhere. It's as common as anything. Birds carry them on their feet too, so it's really difficult to get rid of them. And eventually you'll probably find this in your pond or stream, but you might as well make an effort not to grab it while you're grabbing the other stuff. And as I said, the best way to tell that apart is the wavy leaf is a dead giveaway with that one. The other one to watch for is, of course, didymo and various other things. So there's several different ways to grow these, and some of them ways of growing them is better in terms of finding out whether you've got nasties, because if you have, then they'll grow as well, and then you can take them somewhere and have them identified.
So you collect them. Do you propagate them at home first? You talked about the peat pots.
The peat pots.
Peat pots.
Yeah. There's actually a couple of ways. We first tried them. I've got some peat pots here actually. We first tried. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is when you're handling these plants, a bit late now because I've been picking them up, but be very careful because there's birds and wildlife in these streams, and often salmonella or amoebas, things like that, in the water. So be very careful. I usually wear these good old plastic gloves.
That's a good point actually.
And make sure you wash your hands well afterwards, because it's so easy to get really sick if you're not careful playing around with these things and the water that they're in. So one of the ways too that we discovered as we were working through the whole process of how to do this was that if we had some peat pots, I've got some down here in my box. These little things are great because they disintegrate once they've been in the water for a while. So what we did was we got a tray like this, and we put some material in it.
Is
and I've just used sacking. It's just ordinary old sacking. But you could use anything cotton or anything that will break down in the water after a period of time. That won't cause a problem.
Yeah.
So you do this and open up all your little peat pots, and then we stuff the peat pots with a mix of river sand and ordinary old potting soil, just 50-50.
Yeah.
That'll be fine. And down here I've got some soil. I'll just put that over there. So I've got a bag here with the 50-50 mix.
So that's 50-50
sand and potting soil.
And
or
the sand
soil
you just pick up from
a beach. Well, not beach sand, sorry, river sand.
River sand.
Yeah, just something quite coarse.
Yeah.
Something coarse and grainy.
And
Make
is
a
that
hole.
for the drainage?
It's more to do with their natural, where they grow naturally, because they sit in water.
Yeah.
So drainage isn't a problem.
It's not even when they're propagating.
No, because you sit them in water the whole time.
I see.
Yeah, that's why the whole thing about having things that break down in water is better. So then grab one of these and get as much of this material down into that hole as you can and just poke it in. Mm-hmm. And then do the same thing with all the rest of your pots. Stick them in here quite tight, so that the idea is that once they're ready to go, you pick up the edges of this, and hopefully by that stage the roots will have grown through the bottom and attached themselves to the cloth.
Right.
So what you do is you pick up the cloth and you place it in the area that you want to have your weeds and pin it to the ground, or you can dig a little hole, maybe 50 millimetres deep, just deep enough to hold the pots to stop them drifting away.
Yeah.
And then you place the whole thing in the hole, or you can peg it down if you think you can retrieve your pegs later.
Right, yeah.
Things like weed mat pegs work quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It depends too how deep the mud is on the bottom. If it's a slimy mud that goes down too far, you'll have to go quite deep to get them to attach to something quite solid.
Sure.
So that's as simple as that. But so you do this. You have all your little pots jammed in here quite tight, so that when you put them in the water, they don't float away. And then after a few weeks in the water, these will start, attaching and everything. Yeah. This will all rot away, and you'll be just with your plants.
A big root mat sort of underneath.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have a little colony of plants that will start, diversifying out into the rest of the waterway. Yeah. And once you've planted this, I'm back up a wee bit. When you've got to this stage where you've put them in here, you need to sit them in a tank of water or a baby bath, anything really, anything that a paddling pool, anything that you could use to keep them underwater, possibly as much as that, a couple of 100 millimetres of water. And it can be still. If you've got a creek that you feel comfortable about putting them in, you could do that.
Okay. But what about a garden pond?
Yeah, garden pond would be fine. The good thing about doing it this way and keeping them out of the stream until they're ready to go is that if anything nasty turns up in amongst the plants, then you'll see them come up and then you can get them ID'd. So that's one good way to do it.
That sounds good.
This would be good. I think possibly you could even use like old egg cartons to do this.
And they would break down.
Yeah, they would, because they're made of this sort of same material, and you just use the bottoms, where the eggs go, and you could probably do that as well, and just sit it inside the tray, and eventually it will attach to the hessian. Now the other way, and one of the ways that we ended up doing it, because of the expense of huge, because we wanted thousands of plants and we couldn't have time to do them that way. Yeah. So one of the ways we did it, now what have I done with my string? Here it is. Oops, and my scissors. We gathered large numbers of things like this and we laid them out like this, 2 or 3 plants at a time. And then we just wrapped some paper. What have I done with that wet paper? Oh, here it is. Grab this.
That's just ordinary paper?
Well, this is ordinary hand towels, but we actually use newspaper.
Right.
Anything, although the print, we were worried about the print, and we started using a plain newsprint.
Yeah, because you can buy the big reels.
Yes,
from the
exactly.
newspaper,
But these are just ordinary old paper hand towels, and we just made a bit of a thing at the bottom, like this, so that they was all held in. and wrapped it around there. It was a bit time consuming, but it wasn't nearly as time consuming. And then we just wrapped it up with some string. Yeah. And this is ordinary garden twine, so that breaks down as well. And then once we did that, we tied them off. I'm going to go to a lot of trouble with this. We made holes, we had a trowel a bit like this, and we just dug a hole in the bottom of the mud and pushed it right down into the mud, and then planted a bamboo pole beside it so we could identify where we'd put them all.
Where they were.
Yeah, that's right. And with this one in particular, we had a great success. They all, after a period of time, established themselves really well. And I mean, if you're not afraid of transferring anything nasty, if you're pretty sure that you've got a clean plant, then doing it this way is quite quick and efficient. The best thing to do is not to plant into too deep water. Maybe, it depends, our lakes we were planting in were quite shallow, and we planted, maybe a couple of metres or 3 metres from the bank, but no more than that. If you've got a stream that's quite swift, it would be better to plant a bit closer to the bank until the plants establish themselves. But some of the plants that we had planted eventually escaped and started, growing in all sorts of absolutely, it was very exciting, including
that's what you want to happen, isn't it?
That's right, and including some of them escaped into there's a place at the bottom of the lakes where the water channels out and into the local stream with a big grate in the top, and the water races through there, and these even established themselves in that very fast water,
so
which was a great surprise. Much more hardy than we had suspected. They're wonderful, really.
So you talked about these are the plants that have root systems.
That's right.
These
are the macrophytes.
What about the algae? Do people harvest those and propagate them as well?
And we've done that too. There's two of them. One is called Cara globularis, and the other one is Nightella hookerii. And they look just like an algae. They have a very circular stem that's hollow in the middle. So like how algae looks quite fragile. Well, they are very fragile. And so when you're collecting them, they're very you can tell they're very obvious. They have a very obvious growth pattern. And when you're collecting them, you need to collect them very carefully so that they don't collapse. The cell structure doesn't collapse. Otherwise, they won't grow.
So how would you do that?
So possibly, the way I did it was gather a handful and push it gently into a bucket and keep some of the water, so that I ended up with quite a lot of usable material. And again, being careful not to take too much of the material that's there, so you're not destroying that habitat.
What colour are the algae?
They're very green.
Very bright green.
Bright green. Sort of this kind of colour, really. Very bright green. And they look quite tubular. You can see that they're different. They grow in similar places. Some of them can grow in quite deep water. This one can too. This can grow down as far as 10 metres. So if you've got quite deep water, don't be afraid to use it because it will migrate down into the deper water.
And would you aim to get a mix of all these plants in an area?
This is the idea, is to use 2 or 3 if you can, and if you're game enough to try the charophytes, the algae, that's even better because then you get a better diversity. And we're happy to help anybody that wants to have a go at it. It's quite fun, and
I'm sure it is. And quite rewarding
it's a good result.
The environment change.
It's true. It's great to see that happening. So what now?
So is there anything else that people need to be aware of?
Collecting
or propagation?
One of the things that we discovered, and I also observed, when we were collecting and growing, was that a lot of the plants get covered in algae, just because of the light levels that are happening.
The good algae? Or
no, it's just the ordinary everyday algae that gets, people get in their ponds and cover up their goldfish, and they're always wanting to try and get rid of it. But what it does is if you get it too thick around baby plants that are trying to grow, it smothers them. So for the first few weeks, 4 to 8 weeks possibly, trying to grow them to a point where you can get them into the pond. We did a bit of pulling that stuff out, getting rid of it, but not too much. It wasn't too bad. But just be aware that if the algae starts to smother them too much, you will lose them. So you might need to pull some of it off. But if you've got it in your kids' paddling pool or somewhere like that, it's not too hard.
Of that method,
yeah, absolutely.
The
if you're planting straight into the creek like this, you might need to put your waders on and go in and rake some of it off until until it lets the plants come through. Once they come through and they attach themselves, they should cope with the algae really well. Yeah.
And I guess being natives, they should grow well.
They're made
in
for the
that
job.
environment.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and if you collect them from an area nearby,
absolutely,
you know that they can establish in those conditions.
In those same conditions.
Yeah.
Yep, they're fine. Yeah, they'll do well. Just trying to think what else we could talk about. I think that's about it, really. Have we run out of time, or we've got more time, or I don't know what else we talk about.
Okay.
Oh, right. All right. Okay.
So, at the Pegasus Township Lakes,
areas,
you've been establishing this.
Yeah.
How successful has that been?
Well, it's been really good, actually. We were really surprised at the growth of particularly this one, Propagation Cheesemanii. It spread really well, and it started breaking off, and bits drifted, and it's getting really well established. There's a huge amount of wildlife out there now, which is really exciting.
What kind of wildlife do they attract?
Well, birds. There's so many birds out there. I can't begin to tell you how many. And that's been really exciting for us to see too.
Yeah.
Mind you, the birds have been a bit of a problem in us trying to get other plants established, because they've been pulling the typha, the bulrush, the native bulrush that we've been planting. They pull it out of the ground and turn it up and chew the roots off.
Oh, do they? Okay.
So we've been having a bit of a problem with them. And the pukekos also pull things like flax and cabbage trees out of the ground. So that's been a bit of fun.
Yeah. So you want the birds, but only when the plants are ready for them.
Well, the birds are great with these because they keep... I mean, these can overgrow too and become a problem themselves. I mean, they are a weed, a pondweed. Even if they are native, they can still eventually become a problem. Yeah. So the birds do help keep some of them down to a more of a doable level. And so we want the birds there, and it's their native habitat. That's why we're creating it. So it's great to have them there. But we're just having some mighty battles over getting some plants established. But these particular pondweeds have done really well. This one drifted off in the wind and made little patches all over the place.
Okay.
This particular one just took itself off out into the deepest part of the water and made this enormous round, it almost filled the whole lake, the centre of the lake, which was very exciting. And we had to put, our big long gumboots on to get out there and sort of start having a look at it. The Myriophyllum has mostly grown around the edges of the lake like this, and it's becoming more terrestrial. It's gone more up and up onto the ground and spreading and spreading. The ducks love it, the birds love it. They nest in it and they eat it, and they're really enjoying it.
Does it help with erosion as well? Sort of
I assume it would, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, because building these lakes, really honestly, all they did to construct them was to dig them out. Yeah. And, we destroyed a whole bunch of willows and then dug out the lakes. So we were left with raw edges. Yeah. And these are definitely, the plant growth is amazing out there, including weeds that we don't want. Yeah. But we're having a lot of problem with willows. Okay. But it's just one of the things you have to do when you're doing conservation or revegetation. And so these are definitely helping in terms of erosion and
they seem to have quite a big root system.
They do. You can see it's quite thick and it really holds the bank quite well. Yeah. And they do really well. And they're quite pretty. This one's common name is parrot's feather. Okay. And when you see it in the water, you can see why it sort of opens up and becomes this, like a feather. Just looks like a feather. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah. So it's very exciting to see it going. We've got another few years to go yet before we're finished out at Pegasus, out at the conservation areas, and there's a lot of enrichment planting and things to happen out there as well. And it's going to be an ongoing battle out there for quite some time. It's been wonderful for us. Yeah. It's been wonderful. And these have been a real learning curve and a really wonderful thing to learn about.
Yeah. And great to have these areas established if people do
want to set
up their own.
Right, because eventually I can see us using the Pegasus conservation areas as like a arboretum, I suppose. And We'll be collecting things from out there once things are well established,
Yeah.
and we get permission to do that. And other people might be able to do that too if they get permissions to go out and harvest bits and pieces of things.
Oh,
It's such a huge
sounds
area
great. Yeah.
that there will be plenty of plant life out there eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
That's lovely.
exciting. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Soren.
You're welcome. I hope people have fun
Yeah,
playing around
sounds
with them.
fascinating.
Okay, thanks.